What if your cell phone wasn't just a distraction, but a spiritual trap? In today's video, you'll learn the true story of Avery Collins, a young woman who died for 7 minutes and came back with a message from God about what's behind the screens we use so much. What she saw will shock you. Like, subscribe to the channel and comment below which city you're watching from. Let's spread this truth as far as possible. My name is Avery Collins. I'm 19 years old, and I live in Flagstaff, Arizona. On the morning of September 13th, 2023, my heart stopped. Literally. It all started with something ridiculously banal, a notification from TikTok. I was in the school bathroom, as I always did between classes, and I clicked without thinking twice. I sat on the floor, leaning against the cold wall, immersed in the screen like someone diving into the bottom of the ocean and forgetting to come up for air. But that morning I had skipped breakfast. I hadn't slept well. My heart had been racing for days. Everything inside me was out of balance, but I wasn't listening to my body. I was just listening to the sounds on my feed. The last thing I saw was a video of a girl saying that no one really cares about you before the screen went black. My body fell. A collapse. Cardiac arrest. No warning, no chance. But the scariest thing was what happened after, because I didn't go into a dark void. No. I was pulled into a place where nothing was hidden. I can't explain what exactly happened after my heart stopped. There was no tunnel. There was no darkness. It was as if I had been sucked out of my own body, like a breath ripped from my chest. Suddenly I was floating, but not alone. All around me there was thousands of other presences. Silent. Some looked confused, others at peace. And all of them were holding a cell phone, even there, in the afterlife, even without a body. The scene left me in shock. It was as if we were all in some kind of celestial room, immense and without walls, but with a dark, almost gray sky. The souls did not talk to each other. They just slid their fingers across invisible screens, empty eyes, hollow hearts. That's when a voice spoke to me. It wasn't a sound. It was a vibration inside my soul. She said, "Do you want to understand what's going on? Then watch." At the same time, I was taken to a space that looked like a theater, but the stage was made of smoke, and in the center, images appeared, like living projections. I saw my own eyes, from the point of view of someone watching me. I was sitting in bed at night with my face illuminated only by the blue light of my cell phone, alone, rolling, rolling, rolling. But the most terrifying thing was what emerged behind me. Shadows. They moved like snakes in the dark, whispering lies straight into my mind. I couldn't hear the words with my ears, but I could feel them in my chest. You are not enough. Nobody cares. She is prettier than you. And the more I scrolled, the more these shadows grew. That's when the voice spoke again. These are not just thoughts. They are entities, and you feed them daily. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But I had nowhere to go. Then the scene changed. Now I was seeing hundreds of people. Men, women, children, all with their faces glued to the screens. Some were laughing to themselves, others were crying. But no one was looking at each other. And around each one, the same shadows moved, feeding on their energy like invisible parasites. The voice spoke again. What you call entertainment, we call spiritual distraction. My spirit cringed. I felt shame, disgust, fear. But still, I had no idea what was coming. It was at this point that I began to feel something changing around me. The shadows began to recede, as if something, or somebody, was getting closer. The air, if I can call it that, became denser, vibrating with an energy I had never felt before. And then he appeared. Not walking, nor emerging little by little. He was there, and I just knew. It was God. But it wasn't an old man with a white beard or a distant figure like in the paintings. It was pure presence, a light so intense that it didn't hurt, On the contrary, it enveloped me with a love that completely dismantled me. I fell to my knees, or what that would be outside of the physical body, because being before him is like every part of you is exposed, and at the same time, embraced. And he spoke to me not with voice, but with truth. That truth that goes straight to the core of who you are and tears you apart with tenderness. You have been connecting to everything but me. Those words pierced me. I felt it every time I put off praying to check notifications. Every time I opened a video instead of the Bible. Every time I ignored my father talking to me because I needed to answer that DM. I cried, not out of fear, but out of regret. Out of shame for having traded something eternal for something so small, so bright, and so empty. And he showed me. Again, the scenery changed. Now, it was as if I was within my own browsing history. I saw the videos I watched in secret, the messages I sent lying, the mean comments I left on impulse. But the most terrifying thing was seeing how each of these actions attracted spiritual creatures which connected to me like thin, dark ropes. And those strings didn't disappear when the phone was turned off. They were there, glued to the soul. That's when God said something that made me tremble. Technology is not evil, but it has become the altar. An altar where millions daily sacrifice their attention, their identity, their relationships, and even their faith. I felt small, but he looked at me, and in that look, there was hope. You can still choose. After these words, everything went silent. But it wasn't empty silence. It was a silence full of meaning, as if the entire universe were holding its breath. And then, God reached out. When he touched my shoulder, or the essence of who I was there, a new scene opened up. It was an endless corridor made of glass, and on the walls, like windows, appeared moments of my life. But something strange happened. Every time one of these memories showed, me holding the cell phone, the scene distorted. The voices of the people around me disappeared. My parents talking to me turned into whispers. My smiling friends turned into faceless silhouettes. And then, a sentence echoed like thunder inside the room. What you don't hear gets lost. That was it. Two hadn't listened to life around me. I was so busy consuming content that I didn't realize that my own story was fading away. God showed me my 15th birthday, my parents laughing, my grandmother hugging me, and I, in the corner, taking a selfie. It showed me the day my little brother fell off his bike and hurt himself. I saw blood, I saw tears, and I saw myself. Opening Snapchat before helping him. It destroyed me. But then, God pointed to another window. In it, there was a girl kneeling on the bedroom floor, crying. It was a recent scene, and I felt like it was something happening at that very moment. Era. My little sister Lila. She prayed. With simple words, almost whispered, God, I don't want Avery to die. Please listen to me. And I saw. When she said that, a light came out of his mouth like a golden thread rising to the sky. At the same moment, angels of light moved. Fast, intense, like warriors with purpose. They surrounded my sister and also me. A wall of light was created, pushing back those shadows that once seemed invincible, and God spoke again. A true prayer breaks invisible algorithms. These words hit me like a bomb. While the internet connects us with data, prayer connects us with heaven. I cried so much, I thought I would fall apart. He said, you think you're alone, but every time someone prays for you, heaven moves. Even if you don't see it, even if you don't believe it. And then everything shook, as if something was being decided. I looked at him, and before I could even speak, he answered, it's not over yet. There's still time. In that instant, everything around me dissolved again. The light, the angels, even the direct presence of God. Everything faded away like a curtain being slowly pulled back. But I wasn't coming back. Not yet. I was taken tune last place, and to this day, just remembering it makes my whole body shiver. It was as if I were beneath a gigantic structure, with cables, wires, and signals floating through the air. But this wasn't human technology. It was spiritual. It looked like a control center, like a headquarters of darkness. Screens floated everywhere, showing millions of people, children, teenagers, adults, seniors, all prisoners, in the same gestures, swiping, clicking, liking, watching, isolated. But the most horrible thing was what was behind of these actions. Creatures, shadows with eyes of fire, operating distraction systems with millimeter precision. They knew exactly when to send a notification. They knew the exact moment when someone was most vulnerable to suggest a video, an image, a comparison. Every click, every scroll was like an act of unconscious worship, and the voice of God was present again even without me seeing him. They think they're in control, but they've given up their will in exchange for dopamine. Dopamine. That word echoed loudly, and I understood. It was like a spiritual currency. Every like, every screen addiction was as an offering on a digital altar, sustaining that monstrous system. And then I saw something even worse. I saw parents ignoring their crying children because they were watching funny videos. I saw couples sleeping on their backs, each with their cell phone glued to their face. I saw 3-year-old children hypnotized by screens while dark creatures fed on their innocence. And there, in the face of that, a truth fell upon me like a bolt of lightning. The world is being discipled by algorithms. And there's no way to fight this with human willpower. Only with the light, with the presence, with the true connection. It was when the voice spoke for the last time in that place. You will see it all again. But next time it will be in the flesh. And your mission will be to show people that they can break free, but it will be hard. They will laugh at you. They will call you an exaggeration, but some will listen, and that will be enough. At that moment, I wanted to go back. For the first time, I wanted the pain, the recovery, the struggle, because nothing, absolutely nothing, was more urgent than freeing those who were still imprisoned. And then everything shook again. And darkness came. The darkness lasted for a second or an eternity. I don't know. I only remember one shock brutal, assailant scream inside my soul. And suddenly, pain. Pain in every cell. It was as if I had been spat back into my body and I didn't want towel come me. My chest burned. My throat was closed and everything felt suffocating. I heard shouts in the distance, hurried voices. A man saying, "She's back. Heart rate has resumed. Breathing is shallow." But I couldn't open my eyes. I only felt my body heavy, crushed, inside and out. And yet, a whisper echoed in my mind. "You saw. Now speak." I was technically dead for 7 minutes. 7. The doctors said that with the lack of oxygen to my brain, I would likely have after effects. But when I finally managed to open my eyes, something was different. I saw things that others didn't see. People walking down the hospital hallways glued to their cell phones, and around them grayish shapes, hunched over, whispering nonstop. Not with words, but with feelings, anxiety, envy, sadness. I saw a nurse, exhausted, trying to comfort a patient, and behind her a little light shone. An angel. Quiet, but firm. He activated himself. Every time that woman touched someone with compassion, it was as if the veil had been torn. And I knew that wasn't a side effect. It was part of the mission. My body was in pieces. Fractured ribs, a collapsed lung, my face with deep bruises. But what hurt the most was my soul. Because now I was back to a world sleeping with its eyes open. My father came into the room. He was holding his cell phone. When he saw me awake, he dropped the phone and fell to his knees, crying. My mother was behind him, trembling. And only then did I realize they had prayed, non-stop. I tried to speak, but my voice was weak. Still, when I managed to whisper, it was with the only sentence that mattered at that moment. I saw what they are doing to us, and I need to tell. The next few days were a blur of pain, morphine, and physical therapy. But even in the moments when I was drugged, my spirit stayed awake. It was as if I had come back with a sensor on, a spiritual radar that would not turn off. And that's how I started to see. At the hospital, with every patient who passed by with their face glued to the screen, I felt a weight, not awe, as if the environment became denser. And along with this weight, those dark presences, they appeared again, shrouded in mist, with small, dull eyes, muttering things that no one seemed to hear, but everyone seemed to believe. I saw a mother ignoring her son's crying to finish watching a video on Instagram. Around the boy, 3 shadows slowly rotated, feeding on his frustration. And on the mother, a larger creature who whispered, "You deserve this time. You have nothing else to give." These entities, they didn't scream. They whispered lies with the appearance of self-care. And that shocked me more than any demonic movie image. Why the chains that bind us today are made of logic and convenience. It's just a video to relax. Everyone does it. You need to distract yourself. But I had seen what was happening behind this distraction. An invisible army building walls between parents and children, between friends, between souls. One night, while still in the hospital, I went to the bathroom supported by a nurse. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. Swollen face, stitches on the neck, scars on the forehead. But my eyes were awakened. And it was there, staring at my reflection, that I understood. I am a survivor of a system that almost robbed me without me realizing it. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't just a cardiac arrest. It was a soul collapse caused by years of exposure to a constant stream of comparison, distraction, and emotional manipulation. And the most perverse? I thought everything was fine. I thought it was just being a teenager. Just follow the trend. But I was being discipled by demons with Wi-Fi. I couldn't keep quiet anymore, even if they called me crazy, even if they made fun of me, because I saw too much. And now it was my responsibility to show. I was discharged a week later. My body was still far from ready, but my soul seemed to be begging to leave that hospital. Coming home was strange, familiar and strange at the same time. Everything was the same. The old couch, the smell of my mother's coffee, the room with my things. But I wasn't the same anymore. And what bothered me the most was understanding how the world kept spinning on autopilot. In the car, my father took out his cell phone at the red light. At home, my brother played video games with headphones in each ear and a blank face. My sister was watching YouTube videos with the light from the tablet shining on her face and didn't even notice when I walked through the door. I wanted to scream, but instead I cried, silently, because now I knew what that meant spiritually. I saw the invisible chains wrapped around people's wrists, eyes, ears. And worse, I saw who held those chains. But what cut me the most was realizing that the shadows, they are in no hurry. They feed on routine, on constant distraction. They don't need to dominate by force. You just need to never look up. I started testing something. Turned off my cell phone and observed the surroundings, the silence. It was almost scary at first. But within this silence, Gotti started talking again, in little whispers. In my sister's laughter when she put down the tablet. In the look on my father's face when he decided to leave his cell phone in the drawer for one night. In my mother's prayer, weak but sincere. And I realized, the light is still here. It's just muffled. I started writing down everything I saw. Every detail. every view. Not to blog about or post online, because ironically, I knew that use networks to fight networks, it was like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. I wanted talk eye to eye, with real presence. But then, the first resistance came. I told my experience to a friend from school and she looked at me as if I had gone crazy. She said, laughing, "Avery, you almost died. Of course you had a delusion." Others said, "You're exaggerating. Everyone uses a cell phone. No one is possessed because of it." That's when I realized the hardest truth of all. Waking up hurts. And it costs. And many people prefer to sleep. But still, I continued. Because I knew that not everyone was completely lost. Some only, they needed a push, a testimony, a sign, and I was that sign now. The days went by and something inside me began to grow. It wasn't anger, it wasn't fear, a fire that said, "He arrives." Enough of accepting the lie that this is normal. No more watching people, being eaten alive by screens while fake smiles mask exhausted souls. Enough pretending that everything is fine when we go through it, 6, 7, 8 hours a day connected to nothing. So, even though I was shaking, I got up. Literally. At school, I asked to speak to the principal. I told him a bit about my experience, the parts I could put into words. I didn't talk about the creatures or the visions right away. I just talked about the pain of distraction, of addiction, of comparison. He was silent for a while, and then he said, "You have courage, but I don't know if the students will listen." My answer came out without thinking. Maybe they won't listen, but maybe one or two will, and that's the war already won. The following week, I was invited to speak at an orientation class. I gave my testimony. Half the room laughed. The other half was silent, but 3 girls came to talk to me afterwards. One of them, with red eyes, said, "I can't sleep without watching a video. But when the screen goes off, I feel like something is watching me." I held his hand and said, "You're not crazy. You're being called back." We started a group. No cell phones, no apps, only people and truth. We call it Open Eyes. In Namington, the beginning, there were only 4 people. Later, there were 10. Now we are over 30, and at every meeting, someone cries. Someone tells how tried to kill himself after a series of stories. Someone confesses that they feel self-hatred every time you compare yourself online. And someone finds freedom for the first time after simply turn off your cell phone. A girl said, "When I deleted TikTok, it felt like a weight was lifted off my shoulders, like someone stopped yelling at me all the time." And that, the screaming stopped, and in the silence, God spoke again. I saw my father close the laptop and play with Lila in the backyard. I watched my mother handwrite letters to friends she hadn't seen in years. I saw people coming back for real life. It's not a noisy revolution. It is a silent rebellion. And she begins when you choose to look up. Today is exactly 4 months since the day my heart stopped. The scars are still here. On my chest, on my bones, on my face. But the deepest one is in my soul. And she didn't destroy me. She woke up. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night with that feeling. About what the war is still going on. Even when it seems like everything is calm. Because now I know, I saw. And if you're listening to me now, if you're watching this video, it is not by chance. You have been chosen, just like I was. Because there is something in you that is still alive, even if it is small. A spark, a restlessness, an internal cry that says, "That can't be all." And I'm here to confirm it to you. It is not. There is a plan. There is a heaven. There is a God who sees you when you cry silently after posting a smiling selfie. There is a war going on, not with guns and tanks, but with clicks, distractions, filters and lies. And if you don't take a stand, you'll be dragged along without even realizing it. But you can leave. There's still time. I'm not saying that technology is the villain, but she turned it all. And the problem with idols is that they always demand sacrifices. Your time, your attention, your identity, your soul. When I stood before God, He did not ask me how many followers I had. He didn't care about my feed, my likes, my viral videos. He only showed me one thing. You were made to connect, but with the eternal, with what is real, with me. If this touches you, do something, anything. Turn off your cell phone for an hour, pray, cry, write, walk barefoot, hug someone for real. Go into your room and say out loud, God, I don't want to be a slave to this anymore. He will listen. Because He listened to my 8-year-old sister, and He sent armies of light because of a weak but sincere prayer. You don't need formulas, just truth. I'm Avery Collins, and I died for 7 minutes to tell you this. Not because I'm special, but because you are. And why? Your life matters more than any screen can show. Now the choice is yours. Will it keep rolling, or will you look up? If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.